Putih kehijauan. Hutan kita merupakan sebahagian daripada sumber semula jadi yang boleh diperbaharui dan mampan. Seperti kayu, negara kita komited sepenuhnya terhadap pengurusan hutan bagi memastikan ekosistem dan produktiviti hutan yang mampan untuk generasi hari ini dan masa depan.
Sekarang ini memang kebimbangan Kementerian Kesihatan melihat kepada trend terkini kes-kes makin meningkat.
Kes jangkitan COVID-19 semakin meningkat dan tidak menunjukkan tanda-tanda penurunan dalam masa terdekat. Oleh itu, kerajaan perlu mempunyai kuasa-kuasa tertentu bagi memastikan wabak ini dapat dibendung dengan lebih berkesan dan perkhidmatan kesihatan yang disampaikan kepada rakyat tidak lumpuh.
Pendermaan darah adalah amalan mulia yang boleh menyelamatkan nyawa seseorang. Namun tidak semua orang boleh menderma darah. Adakah anda layak untuk menderma darah? Anda layak menderma sekiranya sihat tubuh badan, berumur 17 hingga 60 tahun untuk penderma baru. Had kelayakan umur maksima bagi penderma darah tetap adalah 70 tahun. Berat badan 45 kg ke atas. Telah makan sebelum menderma. Tidur melebihi 5 jam. Tahap hemoglobin 12.5 gram per desiliter bagi wanita, manakala 13.5 gram per desiliter bagi lelaki. Pendermaan setiap 3 bulan bagi darah utuh dan pendermaan setiap 1 bulan untuk darah aferesis. Anda tidak boleh menderma darah jika anda satu darah boleh menyelamatkan 3 nyawa. Jadilah adiwira dengan menderma darah, mempromosi kepentingan darah dan menganjurkan kempen derma darah.
The latest and worst COVID-19 wave in the country, with a record number of cases and fatalities. How can we combat the effects of the pandemic? How to ensure a balance between lives and livelihoods? What does it take to offset costs related to the pandemic? These and more in just a moment. Hello there, it's good to see you on Money Matters. I'm Azaria Tagaya. On this week's show, we take a look at the recently announced Permakasa Plus aid package, which was announced by the Prime Minister ahead of the 2-week lockdown that began on June 1st. Now, Permakasa Plus has 3 main key aspects, namely boosting public healthcare capacity, preserving the people's welfare, and also ensuring the sustainability of businesses. So basically, the aid package includes several initiatives to help ease the impact of the total lockdown for the economically vulnerable. But with the imposition of a total lockdown for at least 2 weeks nationwide, how will members of the community survive the loss of income, and how much of a financial cushion, so to speak, does it provide for consumers and also businesses? This episode, economist Professor Tan Sri Dr. Nur Azlan Ghazali is with me virtually. Tan Sri, thank you for joining us on Money Matters.
Thank you, Azaria.
Thank you so much. Now, first up, we need to know some first impressions. What are your initial thoughts about the Permakasa Plus package? Does it really address the current needs of the rakyat and also the economy, especially with the first phase of the full lockdown in place now until June 14th?
Okay, if we look through the various packages that has been issued before, structure-wise, pretty much it covers the right framework. We have coverage for health, we have initiative for the people, for the business, and for the economy. And it is so obvious that most of these packages is targeting at least in the first and second phase of this MCO 3.0. I think a lot of concern is resting on to the severity in terms of the income for the public at large. This is very important because our actions to basically reduce the pandemic requires a lot of activities, the normal activities in business and in our living to be, we have to stay at home in a way. So therefore, packages are attending these dimensions of income as well as in terms of the burden for the businesses. I think it's quite well, yeah.
Now, Tan Sri, the direct fiscal injection this time around is actually quite less at 5 billion ringgit compared to 11 billion ringgit in the earlier Permukasa package in March. Now, will this difference in the amount actually affect how impactful the current package will actually be?
Well, this Permukasa Plus is the 8th package, stimulus package being introduced by the government. Altogether, in terms of the value of the packages was about 380 billion ringgit. And that's already total up with the 5 billion of cash injection. It is about 71 billion cash injection. Directly out of the fiscal pockets has been issued to the public. Of course, the more is better, but I think given the situation now and also kind of the status of the fiscal, I believe that this would be sufficient. In total, there's about 18.6% of the total packages from the first till now in the form of fiscal injection. So to bear in mind, there are non-cash injections that come along with it. In the form of exemptions of statutory payments, in terms of deferments of some of the charges, the HRDF, as well as incentives in terms of reducing rentals and as well as utility. So put that all together, it will give some buffer to the people at large as well as the businesses to sail through this period.
Okay, and in his speech, the Prime Minister actually mentioned that the government does have very limited fiscal space at the moment. So I guess the question now is, where else could the government turn to for additional funds?
Well, there's a lot of discussion in terms of to what extent that the government can borrow and how much space that we have. I think it's very important for us to understand, to get some, some common understanding of where are we now. We all know that the statutory limit for government debt has been increased from 55 to 60%. At the moment, on my calculation, we are somewhere around near to about 58% of the GDP. Therefore, there's a little bit more space there. But of course, we are not going to consume all of them. There's about around 2 to 2.1% still available if we want to continue for borrowing. There's also some space in terms of borrowing in terms of from external sources in form of foreign currencies. But before we go into borrowing, there are many other ways that we can consider. Among others, there are GLCs that probably those in the good shape can probably issue some dividend to the government, as well as, we need to also to look into the expenditure side. In many cases, we talk about revenue, but actually in terms of the expenditure, we have some space, I believe, in terms of reallocating some of the expenditure, especially during this period of crisis. Some of the probably not a priority list can be scaled down and improve the efficiency of the government. So in that way, probably that will give a bigger space for the government to come and to rescue some of the pain situation out there.
But how long do you think that this existing aid will be able to help keep the economy afloat?
It will be hard, actually. No one can tell how long is this crisis going to be. Now, this stretch more than a year. And in fact, this is probably the longest ever that Malaysia has experienced in terms of economic difficulties. Back in 2008 and 2009, we spent about 67 billion for the stimulus during that year. But now it's already about 380 billion. And I believe a lot of it depending on how successful we are in terms of controlling and reducing the spread of COVID-19. And also at the same time, in terms of, I think it's very important also to look into the ability of the government to spend. I mean, some of the projects, some of the budgets that has been put forward, the speed of the fiscal injection need to be speed up. So therefore, hopefully that will give a bit more sustainability in terms of economic gain. But how long?
Yes.
I mean, it's very hard to tell. But I believe that if we are successful in terms of ramping up the vaccine, evidence have shown that, for example, in the US and the UK, in many advanced nations, that really the best cure for now.
I see. Well, that's a very salient point, Tan Sri, and we will be getting back to the discussion and we'll be asking you more about businesses which have been suffering tremendously over the past year. We'll get back to you, Tan Sri, after this breather, but in the meantime, for you at home, you can find us on Twitter to share your thoughts on addressing the challenges brought about by COVID-19 to the economy. Don't go away. Money Matters will be back after this.
Shopee 66 Awesome Show. Jom berhibur dengan selebriti kegemaran anda. Dapatkan penghantaran percuma, diskaun hebat dan juga voucher untuk hebat 66. Main dan menangi shilling Shopee dan hadiah-hadiah hebat. 6 Jun 9 malam hanya di saluran berikut.
Perahan pertama
agar setiap hidangan terasa lebih lazat. Kicap ABC diperbuat dari perahan pertama pati kacang soya sekaligus mengekstrak kekayaan aroma yang membuatkan juadah lebih lazat.
Deodorant Nivea Men Cool Kick baharu dengan 5 kali tindakan. Anti bau dan peluh. Untuk kekeringan, kesegaran dan wangian maskulin berpanjangan. Dapatkannya sekarang juga dengan wangian Energy Fresh baharu. Nivea Men, segalanya bermula darimu.
Hai, saya Faizal Lapid. Jangan lupa saksikan saya dalam I Can See Your Voice Malaysia musim keempat Ahad ini di TV3.
Good morning, Mumbai. शहर में क्राइम रेट बहुत बढ़ गया है. We have to get this stopped. I love it. ये काम किसी नॉर्मल पुलिस अफसर के बस की बात है ही नहीं. इसके लिए हमें स्पेशलिस्ट चाहिए. स्पेशलिस्ट? यस सर. राधे.
एक बार जो मैंने कमिटमेंट कर दी, उसके बाद तो मैं अपने आप की भी नहीं सुनता.
Mengamalkan gaya hidup aktif amat penting bagi kesihatan tubuh badan. Meskipun duduk di rumah, kita perlu meluangkan sedikit masa untuk beriadah. Namun tahukah anda kecederaan boleh berlaku jika tersilap kaedah senaman?
Satu kecederaan yang teruk, tulang tu retak, ligamen tu dah putus.
Hidup aktif, hidup sihat. Itulah topik perbincangan yang akan kami rungkaikan dalam Hello Doktor Ahad ini jam 5.30 petang hanya di TV3.
You're still tuning into Money Matters as we speak to Professor Tan Sri Dr. Nur Azlan Ghazali on the Permakasa Plus Aid package and how far it can go in helping the country's economy during this pandemic, especially during the current 2-week lockdown. Now, Tan Sri, from the consumer's point of view, we now turn to the business aspect of the economy. In terms of ensuring business sustainability, which is one of the key aspects in this aid package, we have several initiatives such as financial aid for e-hailing drivers, tour operators, as well as an increase in the special grant for entrepreneurs, micro-entrepreneurs, and also SMEs. Now, there are concerns that these forms of aid can actually not go far enough, given that the fiscal injection is only 5 billion ringgit this time around. And also, since it comes in the form of one-off payments. So many businesses have already been suffering tremendously over the course of the last year since the pandemic began. So from your observation, Tan Sri, does Permakasa Plus do enough to address the current needs of the business community?
First of all, in terms of to what extent that will this PKP or the MCO 3.0 will be impacting the business community, it will be slightly lesser compared to MCO 1.0. I mean, I myself hearing not as much voices as before. Our concern mostly rests on the small, medium enterprises as well as the micro entrepreneurs. I think this is the larger concern that we have. And in this MCO 3.0, one good thing is that they, in many cases, they are allowed. I mean, all these small-scale traders, all the retailers, the restaurants owners, they are allowed to operate, even though with limited amount of time of operation, as well as in terms of the, there's no dining in and so on. So yes, I mean, again, I mean, the injection will not be able to cover everything. But top three business expenditure for SMEs, based on some studies being done before, one is on the wages, number two is on the utility, and the third one is on rental. So this has been repeatedly. We have the wage subsidy, we have a discount for utility, we have rental. But I believe that in terms of rental, this is a bit more challenge there, because at the end of it, it will go back all the way, the chain of borrowings. I mean, a small SMEs are renting premises owned by probably a T20 that finally borrow from the banks. So on this aspect, I think we need to consider as well to give some moratorium, but condition upon the discount offered to the tenants, even though the borrower is basically is a T20. So if we are able to tackle the wages, the utilities, as well as the rental, it will ease off a little bit of the burden by the SMEs especially.
Okay, now speaking about the moratorium, now the loan moratorium deal under this latest relief aid package, do you think it's the best and most practical approach for now, or what are some of the plus and minus points, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I slightly differ in terms of looking at moratorium as a way to ease the burden of the businesses. I know there's a large cry out there wanting moratorium to be automated and to be blanket for everyone. I believe that, one, we have to make sure that whenever we face a crisis, I mean, everywhere in the world, one of the most important things that we have to make sure is that the crises are not transmitted to the financial sector. It's very important for us to clearly understand how does this moratorium will be impacting the standing of our banks as well as broadly in the financial sector. So while moratorium is good, I mean, in terms of, if we do it, we must do it in the form of a very targeted moratorium. And we need to properly understand to what extent that it affects the banking sector. So our previous crisis, ASEAN financial crisis, global financial crisis, the severity will be a lot more if we hang on too much on moratorium. So on this ground, I believe that a very careful evaluation has to be done. I believe Bank Negara are doing it to make sure that banks' standing will remain strong, and so that crisis will probably can be contained only in the real sector rather than going to the financial sector.
Okay, so on that note, Tan Sri, what about the businesses themselves, the entrepreneurs? What do you think are some of the immediate measures that can and should be taken right now for businesses, especially during this full lockdown?
Well, I think, like it or not, we know that, I think even before the crisis, the turning of economy and business toward more fourth industrial revolutions has already been there. We noticed that the digitalizations of business activities has been picked up a lot last year, and many aspects of businesses that can be conducted through digital platform need to be so. So this is very urgent, and government need to also to come out to put some support, especially for the small and medium enterprise, about how to go about in terms of digitalizations. Businesses have also to look in terms of their business model and the efficiency of business. And one aspect of the businesses is about the layoff of workers. I would really urge employers to take that as a last option. I believe that, there are many other ways, in addition to scaling down a little bit on the salary, but employers and employee can sit down and look into probably, in terms of sharing the burdens. I mean, in terms of providing at least minimum means for them to continue their living, at the minimum level. So this is very important. Businesses need to be quite innovative, looking into various aspects of it.
Yes, indeed, Tan Sri. And we have to bear in mind that we also have the second and third phases of the lockdown to look forward to. We'll be getting back to that point after this short breather. We're going for a short break right now. When we return, the discussion intensifies. Don't go anywhere. Money Matters will be back after this. Thank you for still keeping us company on Money Matters as we discuss further on the impact of COVID-19 on the economy with our guest, economist, Professor Tan Sri Dr. Nur Azlan Ghazali. Now, Tan Sri, continuing our discussion from earlier on, now as part of a closing move to the government's latest Permakasa Plus aid package, the Prime Minister, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, actually revealed that he and members of his cabinet will be undergoing a voluntary 3-month salary cut. Now, the salaries will instead be channeled into the National Disaster Trust Fund to help COVID-19 expenses. How meaningful is a move like this? Because this is actually not the first time we've seen this. We saw this during the first MCO last year. So how impactful will this move be?
Well, not only the cabinet, even the civil servants like me also, we are in the spirit of solidarity. I believe that quantum-wise, it might be very small. I mean, if we total up, maybe around 35 million ringgit to be injected in the fund. But I think the spirit there is to show solidarity, to give strong moral suasion to the public that, the cabinet minister, the deputy ministers, even the civils, about 1 million plus civil servants, also shouldering a little bit, though some of them are very small. But I believe this will give a good, moral spirit for people out there.
Okay, Tan Sri. Now, I have to ask you this question. Following the Financial Policy Committee meeting on May 27th, the country was still optimistic that the economy can achieve a growth rate of between 6% and 7.5% this year. But this round of the nationwide lockdown, most economic sectors, especially most of the service industries, have also been forced to suspend their operations, and they actually contribute about 58% of the country's GDP. So in your opinion, Tan Sri, is it still possible for Malaysia to achieve its GDP growth target for this year?
When we put up this forecast, it was at a situation where we don't have this surge in the pandemic. We are grounding our growth for the future much on our ability to benefit from the global economy, where we know that the world economy will be rebounding to about 6% from minus 3.3%. The advanced economy, which consume our exports, will also be rebounding to around 5 to 5.2%. So this is actually the opportunity for us. But unfortunately, I believe that with this surge in pandemic and MCO 3.0, definitely the growth projection need to be revised. On my calculation, probably it will be around 5.5%. Sounds reasonable, but it depends on to what extent we are successful in terms of containing this surge that we are experiencing now. And you are right. I mean, you know, one side of the economy is playing in the global sector, but the larger portion, especially the one that goes to the pocket of the public, you know, the workers, as you said, that services sector itself consume basically contribute about 58%. And there's about 60% of Malaysian workers, about 9.1% of Malaysian workers out of 15 plus million actually in the services sector. And these are very much domestic in nature. So again, I believe that the growth projection for this year will be revised slightly downward. And we hope that we are successful in this containing the pandemic, and hopefully that it will not be that far down in terms of the revision for the economy.
Okay, Tan Sri. Now, we know that the national debt is actually debt that the government needs to repay, but under what circumstances will the government be unable to repay the debt? Is there a possibility that the government could actually run out of resources, especially now that nobody knows how long this pandemic will linger on?
I think that there is quite a serious flaws in terms of the discussion in terms of this aspect of debt, the government debt. Sorry to say that I believe that even starting from the previous election, there's a lot of wrong understanding about the status of the fiscal, the status of debt. Well, there is no absolute connection or correlations between a country's performance and debt. If you look at it, I mean, there are countries, rich countries are borrowing, maybe European economies and some of the Japanese economies, US even down south are borrowing at a higher rate than us. And having a low debt rate alone does not necessarily mean good. I mean, there are many poor countries, Zimbabwe, Myanmar are borrowing at around 35%. So most important is that we borrow for the right purpose, and also we are able to pay it back. You know, I think on this ground, the whole world, the way I look at it, last year has pushed up their debt. So across the board, all nations have increased their debt, and it's quite reasonable. We have quite a good records of controlling our debt. The deficit widened when we faced a crisis, 2008, 2009, even in 1997, 98. But then we taper it down all the way from minus 6.7% before in the GFC 08, 09 to about 3%. So if there is a need to borrow, I believe that we need to pursue on it as long as we make sure that we benefit from it rightly, and also we are able to serve it. At the moment, rating-wise, we are at BBB+. Many countries, our peers are also having slight revised downward in terms of ratings. But I believe that if, again, I mean, the most important thing is for us to be able to contain the pandemic. And I believe that the rest of it, it should be quite automated in the sense that economy will be growing up again, revenue will be growing up again, and therefore, at this point, there's not much concern in terms of our ability to serve our debt.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Tan Sri, for your views today. That's all the time we have. Once again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Money Matters. We really do appreciate you making the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for our viewers, thank you for tuning in. We do hope you gained some insight from today's discussion. And do join us again next week, same day, same time, for more money insights that matter. I'm Azaria Tagaya. Thank you for watching and stay safe.